The air inside the VIP lounge of the Obsidian Club was thick with the scent of burning Cuban cigars and expensive cologne. It was a place where millions were traded over crystal glasses of scotch, and where the people who served the drinks were expected to be completely invisible. Maya adjusted her apron, the coarse fabric cutting deeply into her skin. The uniform was 2 sizes too small, designed for the petite, fragile girls the management preferred to hire. At 245 pounds, Maya felt like a mountain of flesh forced into a doll's clothes. Her feet burned inside her cheap flats, and her lower back throbbed with a dull, constant ache. She held a silver tray balanced on her fingertips, keeping her eyes fixed firmly on the polished mahogany floor. To the men sitting at the corner table, she was not a human being. She was just a shadow, a moving piece of furniture that brought them their ice and their clean glasses. They looked right through her, their eyes sliding off her large frame with open disgust or total indifference. But Maya saw everything. She heard everything. At the center table sat Tariq, the undisputed kingpin of the city's criminal underworld. He was a man carved from granite, with sharp, predatory features and dark eyes that held the cold weight of a graveyard. Across from him sat an international arms dealer, a slick European man surrounded by tight-lipped, heavy-set bodyguards. The tension between the two men was a physical pressure in the room, suffocating and lethal. Tariq snapped his fingers without looking up. It was a cold, demanding sound. Maya stepped forward immediately, her heart hammering against her ribs as she approached the circle of power. She leaned over the table to pour more water into Tariq's glass, her breath catching as the tight fabric of her vest strained against her chest. Tariq glanced up, his dark eyes scanning her large figure. A look of pure irritation flashed across his face. He rubbed his temples, turned to his associate, and spoke in a low, rapid, and incredibly rare dialect of localized Arabic. His voice was a gravelly purr, filled with casual cruelty. He said, "Look at this clumsy, oversized cow they send to serve us. The establishment is losing its standards. She is so large, she blocks the light from the window. Get her out of my sight before her sheer size ruins my appetite." The arms dealer let out a cruel, mocking chuckle, assuming the words were a private joke locked behind an impossible linguistic wall. Maya froze. The silver pitcher in her hand trembled for a fraction of a second. Every muscle in her body went rigid. Her face burned, but it wasn't from shame. It was from a sudden, white-hot spark of absolute fury. They thought she was stupid. They thought because she carried extra weight and wore a stained apron, her mind was empty. They didn't know about the master's degree in Middle Eastern studies gathering dust in her small, cramped apartment. They didn't know about the thousands of hours she had spent analyzing regional dialects and ancient texts. They didn't know she was only here, enduring this daily hell, to pay off the crushing medical bills that were slowly killing her family. Maya lowered the pitcher. She didn't shrink away. She didn't look down. Instead, she stood up to her full height, drawing the heavy air into her lungs. She looked directly into the cold, ruthless eyes of the most feared Mafia boss in the city. She opened her mouth, and when she spoke, she didn't use English. She used the exact same rare, royal Arabic dialect Tariq had just used. But her tone wasn't that of a servant. It was sharp, authoritative, and carried the unmistakable cadence of a queen addressing a peasant.
"If my size offends your eyes, perhaps you should look at the doors instead," Maya said, her voice cutting through the quiet room like a diamond through glass. "Because while you are busy insulting the woman pouring your water, your guest guards are currently whispering in the hallway about the 3 hidden shooters they just positioned on the roof across the street." The silence that followed her words was absolute. It was a suffocating, freezing silence. The arms dealer's smile vanished instantly, his face turning a sickly shade of pale. Tariq's eyes widened, a rare flash of genuine shock breaking through his icy composure. The entire room seemed to drop 10 degrees in a single second. Before we reveal the explosive chaos that erupted after those impossible words, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a single moment of this thrilling story. The silence stretched so thin it felt as though the crystal chandeliers above would shatter.
Maya kept her chin held high, her gaze locked onto Tariq. She could see the gears turning behind his dark, calculating eyes. He wasn't just a brutal man, he was a brilliant one, and he was currently recalculating everything he thought he knew about the invisible woman standing before him. But the heavy, breathless quiet didn't last long. From the shadows of the VIP lounge, a sharp, furious voice broke the spell.
"What the hell do you think you are doing?"
It was Mr. Vance, the arrogant restaurant manager. He marched over, his face flushed with a mixture of rage and panic. To Vance, Maya was nothing but a blemish on his perfect high-end establishment. A liability he only kept around because she was desperate enough to work the shifts no one else wanted for half the pay. Vance grabbed Maya violently by the upper arm, his fingers digging deep into her flesh. He pulled her back, trying to force her away from the table. "You fat, incompetent embarrassment," he hissed, his voice a harsh whisper that carried across the quiet room. "How dare you speak to our guests? How dare you open your mouth? Get your oversized ass out of this room before I have security throw you into the gutter where you belong." Maya winced from the pain in her arm, but she didn't cry out. She had endured Vance's cruel insults for months. She had swallowed her pride when he called her a whale, when he forced her into uniforms that cut into her skin, and when he threatened to fire her every time she asked for her paycheck on time. She needed this job. Her mother's medication depended on every single dollar. "Let go of her," Tariq said. His voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a lethal, quiet gravity that stopped Vance instantly. The manager froze, his hand still gripping Maya's arm. He blinked, looking at Tariq with a sycophantic, nervous smile. "Mr. Tariq, I am so deeply sorry," Vance stammered, his arrogance instantly melting into pathetic submission. This beast has no manners. She will be fired immediately, I assure you. She won't plague your sight for another second." "I said," Tariq repeated, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously smooth, "let go of her arm, now." Vance let go as if he had just touched a hot stove. He stepped back, his hands raised in apology, his eyes darting between Tariq and Maya in utter confusion. Tariq didn't look at the manager. His focus was entirely on Maya. He leaned back in his leather chair, his fingers drumming a slow, deliberate rhythm against the mahogany table. "You understood every word," he murmured in English, his eyes scanning her face, looking for any sign of fear. He found none. "And you claim there are rifles pointed at this room." "The guards outside aren't as quiet as they think they are," Maya replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline roaring through her veins. "They used a specific regional slang from the northern ports. They said the birds are in the nest and the sky will fall in 2 minutes. The 2 minutes are almost up." The international arms dealer suddenly reached for his jacket, his face twisted in a desperate panic. But Tariq was faster. In a single fluid motion that seemed entirely too fast for a man of his size, he drew a sleek black pistol from beneath his coat. A deafening roar echoed through the lounge as Tariq fired, the bullet catching the arms dealer dead in the chest. The man collapsed backward, his chair flipping over as he hit the floor with a heavy thud. "Get down!" Tariq shouted, his voice booming over the sudden chaos. Before Maya could even process the gunshot, the massive glass windows of the VIP lounge shattered inward. A hail of high-caliber bullets tore through the room, ripping the leather seats to shreds and smashing the crystal bottles behind the bar into a million glittering pieces. Panic erupted. The arms dealer's bodyguards pulled their weapons, firing blindly toward Tariq's men. Screams echoed from the lower floors of the club as wealthy patrons scrambled for the exits. Maya threw her hands over her head, dropping to her knees. She was trapped in the open, terrified, surrounded by flying glass and deadly crossfire. She closed her eyes, preparing for the worst, thinking of her family, thinking that this was how it would all end. Suddenly, a heavy, warm weight threw itself over her. Tariq had lunged across the space between them. He used his own massive, muscular body to shield her, pressing her down against the hard floor.
He smelled of expensive tobacco, cedar wood, and the sharp, metallic scent of gunpowder. He fired 3 precise shots over her shoulder, dropping 2 of the advancing guards instantly. "Stay low," he growled into her ear, his breath hot against her skin. "I've got you."
For a man who had looked at her with such disdain just moments ago, his grip on her was fiercely protective. He didn't treat her like an obstacle or a burden. He held her tight, shifting his weight to ensure her large frame was completely covered from the incoming bullets. Tariq's personal security team flooded the room, returning fire with brutal military precision. Within 60 seconds, the opposing shooters were neutralized, and the room fell into a horrific, ringing silence, broken only by the sound of dripping liquid and crackling fires. Tariq stood up, pulling Maya to her feet with effortless strength. He didn't look at the carnage around them. He looked only at her, his eyes dark and intense. "You're coming with me," he said. It wasn't a request. It was a command that would change her life forever. The ride to Tariq's penthouse was dead silent. Maya sat in the back of the armored SUV, her hands trembling as she looked at her torn, stained uniform. Next to her sat the kingpin, his face an unreadable mask of cold stone as he stared out the window. The vehicle pulled into the private, heavily guarded underground garage of a towering glass skyscraper. Within minutes, Maya was ushered into a penthouse that defied imagination. The walls were made of pure marble and glass, overlooking the glittering lights of the city below. It was a fortress of luxury, completely cut off from the harsh reality of the streets. Tariq walked into the center of the massive living room, pouring himself a glass of amber liquid. He turned around, his dark eyes locking onto Maya. He didn't offer her a seat. Instead, he stood there, letting the heavy silence fill the room, testing her nerves. "Who are you?" Tariq asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Because my men looked into you on the drive here. They tell me you are Maya Vance's most miserable waitress." But a simple waitress doesn't speak a dialect spoken only by elite families in the northern ports of the Levant. Maya took a deep breath, smoothing down her ruined apron. She refused to let him see her shake. "My name is Maya. I have a master's degree in Middle Eastern Studies and Regional Sociolinguistics. I graduated at the top of my class." Tariq raised an eyebrow, taking a slow sip. "And yet you clear tables for pennies while men look through you as if you are made of glass?" "My father had a stroke last year. The medical bills swallowed our house, our savings, everything," Maya said, her voice hardening with pride. "The academic world doesn't pay fast enough. The Obsidian Club does, even if it means putting up with monsters." Before Tariq could answer, the heavy double doors of the penthouse burst open. 2 of Tariq's guards marched into the room, dragging a disheveled, weeping man between them. It was Mr. Vance. His expensive suit was torn, and his face was white with terror.
"Mr. Tariq, please," Vance sobbed, dropping to his knees on the polished marble floor. "I didn't know the arms dealer was going to betray you. I swear on my life, I had no idea. Please, don't kill me." Tariq didn't even look at the manager. He kept his eyes fixed entirely on Maya. "He touched you," Tariq said softly, his voice carrying a chilling promise of violence. "He called you an embarrassment. He called you a beast." Vance's head snapped toward Maya, his eyes wide with desperate realization. "Maya, please, tell him. I was just stressed. I was trying to protect the club's reputation. You know me, Maya. We're a team." Tariq walked over to his desk, picking up a heavy, solid silver paperweight. He walked slowly toward Vance, his footsteps echoing like a death knell. "Nobody touches what belongs in my circle, and nobody insults a woman who just saved my life." Tariq looked back at Maya. "Do you want him dead?" Maya's breath caught in her throat. The sheer power radiating from Tariq was suffocating. She looked at Vance, the man who had made her life a living hell for months, the man who had humiliated her daily for her size. She didn't want him dead, but she wanted him to know he could never hurt her again. "No," Maya said clearly. "Death is too easy for him." Tariq smiled, a dark, terrifying smirk that didn't reach his eyes.
A wise choice. He turned to his guards, his expression instantly turning into a mask of pure brutality. Break his hands, both of them. Ensure he can never grab a woman or count his stolen money ever again. Then throw him into the street. Vance began to scream, but the guards quickly muffled his mouth and dragged him out of the room, his fingernails scratching frantically against the marble floor until the doors slammed shut. Tariq walked back to Maya, stopping just inches from her. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating from his chest. He looked down at her, his eyes scanning her full face, her soft lips, and the heavy curves of her body that she had tried so hard to hide under the tight apron. "Your debts are gone," Tariq stated flatly. "I had my accountants clear your family's medical bills 3 minutes ago. You owe nothing to anyone." Maya blinked, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Why? Why would you do that?" "Because you are wasted in that kitchen," Tariq said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. "And because from this moment on, you work for me. You are my translator, my analyst, and my chief strategist." But first, he reached out, his large, rough hand gently grasping the collar of her tight, suffocating waiter's vest. With a single, powerful tug, he ripped the cheap fabric apart, freeing her from the tight restraint. "We are going to get you out of these garbage clothes," Tariq murmured, his eyes burning with a sudden, intense obsession. "Tomorrow, the finest designers in the city will be here, and they will learn to appreciate every single inch of you." By the next morning, the grand living room of the penthouse looked like an elite fashion atelier. Racks of silk, velvet, and heavy satin lined the marble walls, reflecting the bright morning sun. 3 of the city's most exclusive designers stood in a tense semicircle, their tape measures trembling in their hands. Tariq sat in a deep leather armchair across the room, a glass of dark espresso in his hand. He looked entirely in his element, relaxed, lethal, and utterly in control. Maya stood in the center of the room, wearing a simple silk robe the staff had given her. For the first time in her life, she felt completely exposed. One of the designers, a sharp-faced man with a pretentious scowl, stepped forward with a roll of dark, heavy shapewear. "Mr. Tariq," the designer stammered, clearing his throat nervously. "For a woman of these proportions, we usually suggest dark colors, structured corsets, and layering to minimize the volume. We can drape the fabric to hide the—" "No," Tariq interrupted. The single word cut through the room like a blade. The designer froze, dropping his tape measure. Tariq slowly set his espresso cup down, his dark eyes narrowing into a dangerous glare. He rose from his chair, his massive frame dominating the space as he walked toward Maya. He stopped just inches away, looking down at her. His eyes didn't hold the clinical, judgmental look of the designers. They held a dark, burning intensity that made Maya's heart race. "You will not hide a single inch of her," Tariq said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that vibrated through Maya's chest. "You will not compress her, and you will not minimize her. She is not one of your starved, fragile runway models. She is a queen." He reached out, his large, calloused hand gently tracing the curve of her hip, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through her skin. "I want velvet. I want emerald green, deep crimson, and royal gold. I want the fabric to hug every curve, to celebrate her weight, not disguise it. If I see a single piece of shapewear near her body, I will have my men throw you off this balcony." The designers turned pale, nodding frantically as they grabbed new fabrics, completely rewriting their plans in a panic. Maya looked into Tariq's eyes, her breath catching. Nobody had ever looked at her body this way, with absolute reverence, hunger, and protective obsession. He didn't want her to change, he wanted the world to change for her. By afternoon, the atmosphere shifted from luxury to the cold reality of war. Tariq's chief security officer rushed into the penthouse, his face grim. "Boss, we have a major problem. The Al-Zarani syndicate just found out their arms dealer was killed at the club. In retaliation, they've completely locked down the northern ports. Our entire shipment of high-grade electronics and defense equipment is trapped inside the shipping containers." Tariq's jaw tightened, his eyes turning to ice. They are trying to starve us out. If those containers don't clear customs and leave the port by midnight, the government will seize them, and we lose $50 million. His analysts scrambled around a massive digital map on the wall, frantically trying to hack into the port's manifest system. The encryption is too complex, boss. It's written in a multi-layered regional coding system mixed with an obsolete maritime dialect. We can't bypass the security locks without the original cipher. Maya stepped closer to the screen, her eyes scanning the blocks of incomprehensible text and numbers. A sudden spark of recognition lit up her mind. "Move aside," Maya said, her voice calm and authoritative. The security tech blinked, looking at Tariq for permission.
Tariq simply nodded, his eyes locked onto Maya, a proud, expectant smirk playing on his lips. Maya sat down at the terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "This isn't an encryption cipher," she explained, her voice steady and confident. "It's a localized linguistic riddle used by the old trading families of Alexandria. They use phonetic letter swaps based on a 19th century shipping dialect." The room went dead silent as Maya translated the codes in real time, her mind working with flawless precision. "If you change the port coordinates based on the phonetic rhythm, there, look at the screen." With a final strike of the enter key, the digital map flashed green. The locked port manifest suddenly cleared. The shipping containers were officially released from the system, bypassing the Al-Zarani syndicate's lockdown entirely. The analysts gasped, staring at Maya in absolute shock. She had just saved Tariq's entire empire $50 million in less than 10 minutes. Tariq walked up behind her, placing his heavy hands on her shoulders. The warmth of his grip grounded her. He looked at the green screen, then down at her, his eyes blazing with a mixture of pride and pure devotion. "I told you," Tariq whispered, his voice dark and triumphant. "You are my secret weapon." The victory at the port was short-lived. Word spread quickly through the criminal underworld like wildfire. The invisible girl wasn't invisible anymore. She was the one holding the keys to Tariq's empire, the mind behind the moves that had crippled the Al-Zarani syndicate. 2 days later, a notification pinged on Maya's encrypted phone. It was a message, followed by a grainy photo of her mother's hospital room. "She has had a critical relapse. Come to the clinic immediately, or she won't last the hour," the text read. Maya's heart plummeted. For a split second, raw, blinding panic clawed at her throat. She instinctively reached for her coat, her mind racing, ready to sprint out of the penthouse to save her mother. But then she stopped. Her academic training took over. She stared at the screen, analyzing the structure of the message. She noticed the syntax, the specific way the sender used the word for clinic. It was a heavy-handed, archaic dialect from the southern border, a dialect nobody in her city actually used. It was a crude, desperate forgery. It was a trap. She walked into the library where Tariq was reviewing weapon shipments. She didn't say a word. She just slid the phone across the heavy mahogany table. Tariq looked at the message, then at her. His eyes darkened with a cold, terrifying promise of violence. "They are trying to lure you out," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "They know you are the one who blocked their shipments. They want you alone." "They think I'm still the frightened waitress who works for scraps," Maya said, her chin lifting with defiant grace. "They think they can play on my emotions because they see me as a weak, soft-hearted target." Tariq stood up and walked to the wall safe, pulling out a sleek, holstered pistol. He checked the magazine with a calm, practiced precision. "Let them think that. We will give them exactly the encounter they asked for." An hour later, their black SUV pulled up to the hospital entrance. The area was eerily quiet, the streetlights flickering in the humid night air. As Maya stepped out, pretending to be distracted and alone, 3 SUVs screeched around the corner, cutting off the path. Men with automatic rifles spilled out, their eyes locked hungrily on Maya. "There she is," the leader shouted, raising his weapon. "Grab the girl. She's the leverage we need to break Tariq's neck." Maya stood perfectly still. She didn't flinch. She didn't scream. She knew Tariq was watching from the shadows of the SUV, his men already in position.
As the attackers lunged forward, the night air exploded. Tariq's elite protection team descended from the rooftops and surrounding vehicles like ghosts. It wasn't a fight, it was a total annihilation. The attackers didn't even have time to fire a single shot before they were disarmed, pinned, and neutralized with brutal efficiency. Tariq stepped out of his vehicle, his coat billowing in the wind. He walked slowly toward the leader of the ambush team, who was currently pinned to the pavement by two of Tariq's men. Tariq crouched down, his face inches from the man's terrified, sweat-soaked eyes. "You tried to take what is mine," Tariq hissed, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "You tried to use a woman of intelligence and grace as a pawn. You were never smart enough to be my enemy." Tariq stood up, signaled to his men, and turned his back, walking toward Maya. He didn't need to say another word. The screams that followed were short, muffled, and final. He stopped in front of Maya, his presence shielding her from the aftermath of the violence.
He took her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones with a tenderness that contradicted the carnage behind him. "You stood your ground," he murmured, his voice thick with pride. "You didn't run, you didn't hide." "I knew you would protect me," Maya replied, her eyes searching his, seeing the raw devotion burning in his gaze. "I will always protect you," Tariq vowed, his hand gripping her waist, pulling her flush against him. "And now, it is time the entire city knows exactly who you are." The grand ballroom of the Obsidian Club had been completely rebuilt, erased of any trace of the violence that had occurred nights before. Crystal chandeliers blazed with light, casting a brilliant glow over hundreds of elite syndicate bosses, international investors, and powerful figures from across the continent. They whispered among themselves, drinking expensive champagne, wondering why Tariq had called an emergency summit of the entire network.
Rumors were flying, but no one knew the truth. The heavy double doors at the top of the marble staircase swung open. The room fell into an instant, breathless silence. Maya stood at the top of the stairs. She wore a custom, floor-length gown of deep emerald velvet that hugged every single inch of her 245-pound frame. The rich fabric celebrated her heavy curves, cascading over her wide hips and accentuating her full chest with royal elegance. Around her neck sat a collar of flawless diamonds that caught the light with every breath she took. Next to her stood Tariq, looking immaculate in a tailored black suit. He didn't offer her his hand to lead her. Instead, he stepped slightly behind her, letting her command the room. He looked at her not as a possession, but as his ruler. They walked down the stairs together, their footsteps echoing in the silent hall. The very same wealthy patrons who had looked right through Maya when she wore a stained apron were now staring at her with wide eyes, completely captivated by her beauty, her presence, and her undeniable power. Tariq stepped up to the gold microphone at the center of the room, his arm wrapping firmly around Maya's waist, pulling her heavy hips flush against his side in a public display of absolute possession. "For years, you have known me as the sole authority of this city." Tariq's voice boomed through the speakers, cold and commanding. "But a true empire cannot be run by force alone. It requires a mind that can see what others miss. A mind that can decode the moves of our enemies before they even make them." He looked down at Maya, his eyes burning with an intense, unyielding devotion. "This is Maya," Tariq announced, his voice echoing with absolute authority. "She is no longer a shadow in the background. She is my chief strategist, my partner, and the undisputed queen of my empire. If you disrespect her, you disrespect me. If you touch her, you die." A collective intake of breath rippled through the crowd. The syndicate bosses bowed their heads in submission, recognizing the new order of the city. Maya stood tall, a confident, triumphant smile gracing her lips. She was no longer invisible. She was invincible. What a breathtaking journey from the shadows to the throne. But now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Maya made the right choice by staying loyal to Tariq, or should she have taken her freedom and left the underworld behind? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. smash that like button and share this video with your friends.